City of Detroit is rolling out 50 sites for EV charging stations. So we're going to make sure that when our Canadian friends come over, you will have no problem finding a place to charge. Canada is doing the reciprocal, and it is because the Biden administration, with the Inflation Reduction Act, giving us extraordinary support, and Governor Whitmer, who has had a leadership in alternative transportation, with her help, down the street on 14th Street, we are building the first public street in America that has wireless charging. You will be able to park your car or drive your electric car, and just like your wireless cell phone charging works, on 14th Street, we'll have the first street in America that's being done in partnership between us and the state of Michigan. And so, Minister, I know you're going to have a really good experience here. With that, I'm going to turn it over to the leader who has focused on transportation from the first day she announced she was running for governor, and is moving from fixing the damn roads to electrifying the roads, Governor Gretchen Whitmer.
Thanks, Mayor. All right. Thank you, Mayor. Well, thank you. I couldn't ask for a better partner than Mayor Duggan. As we all know, there is nothing more pure Michigan than accidentally driving into Canada. All right, if you were driving before 9/11, you know that that is a real thing. Today we're here to talk about how to make that accidental international journey electric. I want to thank Mayor Duggan for hosting us in the incredible city of Detroit, Michiganders, and U.S. Transportation Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership and his partnership, and a warm welcome to Omar Alghabra. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Omar, Canada's Minister of Transport. And of course, a familiar hello to all the IBW members who are joining us, Bill in particular, who I'll be introducing in a minute. All of us are very excited to be here to unveil the new Binational EV Corridor connecting Michigan and Canada. It actually goes all the way to Kalamazoo and Quebec City, 860 miles, or as we like to call it in Michigan, not too bad a drive, right? This is the first cross-border electric vehicle corridor of its kind. It will allow seamless international travel between Michigan and Canada, accidental or otherwise, with abundant charging options throughout your journey. So across Michigan, we are hustling to bring home good-paying manufacturing jobs, critical supply chains to help us build cars and chips and clean energy. And since we established the Bipartisan Economic Development work in December of 2021, we've secured over $16 billion of projects, over 16,000 good-paying jobs. Each of these sectors will be instrumental to our economic future. We are grateful for the private and intergovernmental partnerships that have helped us lead the way. And that includes today's corridor. Last week's announcement of grants from the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, or NEVI. Because of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Michigan will be receiving $110 million under NEVI to build out our electric vehicle charging infrastructure. We will get those resources out the door efficiently so that we can start putting chargers in every region across the state of Michigan. At the state level, we are taking action to strengthen our mobility and electrification leadership. I propose $65 million for electrical vehicle charging infrastructure in my budget recommendation, building on that $110 million from NEVI. The budget also proposed $64 million to transition more fleets to electric, lowering taxpayer energy costs and emissions in the long run. And I have proposed a sales tax cut of up to $2,400 off of electric vehicles to lower costs for the consumer so that every person gets the opportunity to drive some of these advanced mobility options that we're building here. So earlier this year, we announced $10,000 scholarships to retain top engineering talent in our state at some of the leading mobility companies. Now right now in Michigan, we are proud to be the #1 state for clean energy job growth, according to the U.S. Department of Energy. We are predicted to dominate battery manufacturing by 2030, according to business experts, journalists, and financiers, and leading beneficiaries of projects funded that use incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act, according to Climate Power. Our efforts together are paying off, securing 35,000 new auto jobs since taking office, and a majority of those are building batteries or electric vehicles in new and refurbished factories. So we're going to continue winning manufacturing investments. Michiganders will be on the job doing what we do best, which is building things. And because we restored workers' rights, we'll be able to bargain together for fair wages and benefits. Our future is bright. With continued collaboration between local, federal, and international partners, we will be defining the next century of mobility. And with that, I'd like to introduce Bill Baisden from IBEW Local 58. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Whitmer, Secretary Buttigieg, Mayor Duggan, Minister Alghabra, and other distinguished guests. Thanks for inviting me today to speak on this topic of electric vehicle infrastructure and how important it is between the United States and Canada on our international border. I am Bill Baisden, the founder and owner of Dynamic Electrical Group, as well as a master electrician. My shop works here in Detroit, as well as other surrounding areas. My core business is focused on renewable energy products with an emphasis on EV charging and moving into solar technologies. Because of the potential of these markets, the timing is right. Who are we? Well, I'm proud to be here on behalf of 4,500 men and women of the IBEW Detroit Local 58. We represent construction in Detroit in electrical phase. Electric vehicle adoption is key to the country's climate goals, and IBEW members are on the front lines of this transition. Now, the Department of Transportation is requiring an electric vehicle infrastructure training program, or EVITP, certification for all electricians installing EV charging infrastructure. So we're here in Motor City. Well, cars have always been king here in the Motor City, and they still are. There's been a shift in the kinds of cars people are buying. In the past 2 years, we have seen rapid growth in the residential EV charging market to meet the demand of electric vehicles. Local 58 is aggressively training our members to get EVITP certified, and presently Local 58 has over 600 electricians certified. As a jurisdiction bordering our neighbors in Canada, I took note when President Biden went to Ottawa to address the Parliament, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, in March. As he often does here, he repeated IBEW members would build 500,000 EV charging stations across the United States. Not everyone is aware that the North American Union, the IBEW, has 65,000 members, and 2,000 of them are already certified in EVITP. Now, a little bit about who I am. I didn't take the traditional role getting into this occupation. I'm a native of Detroit. I went into the Army after high school, and I wanted to serve my country and be part of something much bigger than myself. I served mostly stateside and in various locations across the U.S., as well as South Korea and Panama. I was trained in communication electronics, where I repaired radio systems for the Army. Well, I got out of the Army in 1997 and eventually returned to Detroit, where I was encouraged by another Local 58 member to join the IBEW. I will say this, as an IBEW member, the benefits available to you are much better than in most jobs in the civilian sector. I made a commitment to branch out into entrepreneurship with electric vehicles. Being in an emerging market as it is, the opportunity was promising. Furthermore, the market developments with all the automakers coming out with EVs, and GM, right behind us here, announcing they will produce 100% of all their vehicles by 2035 will be electric. Cars, as we know, will be transforming. Gas stations will eventually phase out as we know them, and as many as they are around our area. The more I read about the growth potential of the EV vehicle market, changes in policy on the federal level and the direction the car companies were moving, I saw the growth potential. In conclusion, I've been planning to open up my shop for a couple of years. Well, I'm now a new contractor. I've been in business 2 months, and life's been good so far. I chose this specialty as an article of faith in the future, spurred by the passage of recent laws such as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. The investments and upgrades and incentives for new adoption of the climate-forward technologies like EV technologies and adoption are bold steps by the Biden administration, taken towards addressing the urgent and enormous challenges that we face today. That is what this moment demands. I am proud to be a part of the Power in the Future, and I thank you for including me in this discussion. I now turn it over to the Canadian Minister of Transport, Omar Alghabra.
Thank you very much, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour à tous. First, let me just say what an appropriate place to be here making this announcement in Detroit with Windsor, Ontario in the backdrop. I am delighted to be here with Secretary Buttigieg. I'm also delighted to be joined by Governor Whitmer, Mayor Duggan, and Bill from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers for this exciting announcement. I don't have to tell you this, but there are no two countries that depend more on each other for their mutual prosperity and security than Canada and the United States. We are bound together by our integrated economies, our history, our shared values to improve the lives of our citizens. And I know that Canada and the US also share the same goal on the environment. On partage le même objectif en environnement. That is why I'm pleased to announce today the first Canada and the United States EV fuel corridor between Quebec City, Canada, and Kalamazoo, Michigan. On annonce le premier corridor pour l'approvisionnement en carburant de remplacement. We know that more and more Canadians and Americans are switching from gas-powered vehicles to zero emission. And one of the ways to encourage these purchases is by letting you know that you will be able to charge your car on the road, especially when you're traveling long distances or across the border, accidentally or not. This new corridor will ensure that charging stations are no more than 80 kilometers or 50 miles apart along a route that represents one of the busiest passenger and trade corridors between our two countries. In Canada, it will go along the 401 highway to Toronto, then onto Highway 20 into Montreal, concluding along Highway 40 to Quebec City. So this is great news that will not only improve convenience for travelers and reduce pollution on our roads, but also create good jobs, as Bill has alluded to, and help grow our automotive manufacturing sector. There's already 215 charging stations on the Canadian side of the corridor, but more to come. This is only the start, as we are planning to add even more stations. On veut ajouter encore plus de stations. I'm also pleased that today's announcement follows on the joint statement on transportation and climate change that the Secretary and I released in 2021, just a few days into our respective jobs. And it also follows the joint statement that Prime Minister Trudeau and President Biden issued in Ottawa in March, which included our long-standing collaboration on zero-emission vehicles. And today is only the beginning, because we will continue to build green corridors between our two countries. So in short, this announcement is great news for travelers and growing our EV sector on both sides of the border. Thank you all for being here. Merci. And now I'd like to give the floor to Secretary Buttigieg.
Well, thank you very much to my friend and our great partner across the border, Minister Omar Alghabra, the first counterpart that I spoke to after getting this job and somebody who we have worked with on so many shared priorities. I want to thank and recognize Governor Whitmer and Mayor Duggan for welcoming us to this state and this city. We have just been at the summit of the transportation ministers of APEC, the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation Body. People coming from as far as New Zealand, Chile, Japan, and it is a pleasure to showcase the extraordinary successes of this state and this city to that international audience. And of course, both Mayor Duggan and Governor Whitmer have been very important partners to the Biden-Harris administration as we have worked to create good paying jobs and support the future of American infrastructure and transportation. And we're so glad to be here with Bill Baisden, IBEW member and president of Dynamic Electrical Group, and the many entrepreneurs and the many union workers that he represents, because of course that's such a big part of what this is all about. The U.S. and Canada have long enjoyed a deep friendship and a productive partnership, including and especially around transportation issues. For example, we share joint stewardship of the St. Lawrence Seaway, which moves goods between the Great Lakes region and the rest of the world. 64 years ago, at the opening of the Seaway, Queen Elizabeth II declared it, quote, one of the most outstanding engineering achievements of modern times, a highway which will open the middle of this continent to the commerce of the world, end quote. Today, of course, we're recognizing a different and more literal kind of highway, one that I think very much represents one of the most important achievements of our time, and will shape international commerce and travel, both in and far beyond the North American context for decades and generations to come. So I think it's fitting that this first U.S.-Canada EV corridor runs through both Detroit and Windsor, two of the world's great auto manufacturing centers. About $148 billion in cross-border trade came through Detroit past year alone, and about a third of that was related to the automotive sector. And that's to say nothing of the brand new investments driven by President Biden's policies of investing in America. Since he took office, companies from down the block and from around the world have invested billions of dollars to build new manufacturing plants in the U.S., including new union facilities right here in Michigan. As so many people here know, the EV revolution is already well underway. Consumers, industries, and global markets are already heading very quickly in that direction. So the only real question now is whether the benefits of that EV revolution will be accessible to every driver, whether America and its partners will lead the way, and whether it will all happen quickly enough to make the difference we need it to in the fight against climate change. And we are working to make sure the answer to all three of those questions is a resounding yes. As we speak, thousands of union workers here and across the country are building the vehicles of the future, the batteries that will power them, and the chargers that will support them. And thanks to President Biden's vision and leadership, we're building a network of 500,000 EV chargers nationwide in cities, in rural communities, and along alternative fuel corridors. So today, Minister Alghabra and I, carrying through on a commitment made by President Biden and by Prime Minister Trudeau, are proud to announce the first ever U.S.-Canada EV corridor. It's going to stretch 860 miles, around 1,400 kilometers, all the way from Kalamazoo to Quebec City, a corridor that of course includes the Detroit-Windsor tunnel that is beneath us right now. Our goal is for EV drivers to be able to travel far and wide without ever having to wonder or worry about finding a place to charge, not just in the U.S., but across North America. And something we're especially proud of is that our federal investments for EV chargers include those strong workforce requirements, as Bill was describing, like registered apprenticeships and the EVITP, or Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Training Program, through which the IBEW has certified over 20,000 electricians to help build this national network. We don't want to create just any jobs. We want to create good paying, skilled jobs that will help us fight climate change, that will pay the kinds of wages that will help families buy homes, educate their children, and build generational wealth for the future. And that's exactly what we're doing here together. We are working to secure prosperity for this region, this continent, and for our planet, and I am so delighted to be engaging in that work alongside all of you. So thank you very much, and let me direct your attention to the corridor map and again express my appreciation to everybody who is here. With that, I think we have a few minutes for questions from the media, which I think Bobby will be quarterbacking.
Do you have any questions? Go ahead.
First, I want to ask Mr. Alghabra. I'm across the river in Windsor. Obviously, you are aware of the situation happening there with the land use plan. Wondering if you could comment on that. Obviously, it's been topical.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I didn't expect that the first question would be coming to me, but thank you for that question. Look, our government has been talking and taking action about encouraging manufacturing jobs in Canada that help reduce pollution but also create well-paying jobs. Stellantis' announcement with LG to build a battery plant in Windsor was a great success. There is ongoing negotiations right now, so I feel confident that that plant will proceed, but there's still ongoing negotiations, so please forgive me if I'm not able to share the ongoing negotiations in public with you, but I am confident that this project is going to proceed ahead.
We'll go Kurt Nagel with Trains.
My question is, what is being invested in the corridor and decided the route? Why did it go to the very corner?
Well, I'll share a word and then yield to the minister. But in terms of the funding, we're each contributing our respective abilities to support this network. And on the U.S. side, what that means is that this can help align the work that the state is doing with those NEVI funds. The way that this is designed in terms of the Biden-Harris administration's support for chargers is that we're not dictating how all of that works. Not all of the answers are coming from Washington, but the funding is. And then we provide the basic principles and standards, including those labor standards, but also standards around making sure that these chargers are easy to use, interoperable, transparent in terms of pricing, so that we really have quality as well as quantity on the network. And in terms of the locations, it's built on our partnership with the Department of Energy, where we've been working for years together to identify alternative fuel corridors, and that important relationship with our Canadian partners so that we can identify how that connection can best take shape. So we're all in on this future, and so glad that we can coordinate both intergovernmentally with city and state partners domestically, and internationally with our friends. I suppose here I say our neighbors to the south, because Windsor sits south of Detroit, but with our Canadian neighbors and friends.
My question is, why is Forward 2
I'll be quick. Look, for Canada, the Windsor-Quebec City corridor is the busiest corridor for us. And as I stated in my remarks, in order for us to continue to encourage Canadians buy zero-emission vehicles, we need to ensure that we support the creation and the establishment of charging stations everywhere. So ensuring that we have charging stations at the busiest corridor is essential. There, as I mentioned in my remarks, there are a couple of hundred charging stations, many of which have been supported by federal Canadian government investment to build those charging stations. And I want to take a moment to thank Secretary Buttigieg for his leadership on this. This is part and parcel of our collaborative effort over the last couple of years, not only to grow the economy, not only to enhance the resilience of our supply chains, but also to decarbonize the transportation sector. This is part and parcel as well of a recent announcement that we made about green shipping corridors in the Great Lakes. So this is an ongoing effort where both of our governments are taking action to create jobs, but also reduce pollutions. Thank you.
Just basically, for someone watching this, what do you say to the person that's maybe a little nervous about buying an electric vehicle?
Well, look, this transition isn't going to happen overnight, but it's happening quickly. And what I want people to know is that electric vehicles offer an opportunity to capture savings from, of course, fuel savings directly, but also maintenance savings. So that cost of ownership is increasingly becoming lower than it is for traditional gas cars. We're not just urging people to do it because we think it's good for the climate, although it is. We're inviting people to capture those savings, acting to make it easier by making those vehicles cheaper in the first place with support like what we have in the Inflation Reduction Act, and then making sure that you can depend on a charging network. I would also make sure people realize that if you live in a single family home and have a garage, as many Americans do, you already have charging infrastructure, whether you realize it or not. It's the plug in the wall. That's how we charge our hybrid plug-in minivan in Traverse City. But whether you do or don't have access to a garage, you're going to need those chargers along the way as well. And that's why we're working to make sure we support you, if you're already an EV owner or if you're going to be in the future, with those options, so that you know, just as sure as you're setting out on a road trip today, you're going to find a gas station when you need it, that the same is true for those electrons you need to affordably and cleanly fill up your car.
Has the train service been stopped regarding the speed because of electric? Because from Detroit to Chicago is 4 hours, and they're supposed to be cutting it down to an hour. Is that still going to go forward, or will electric stop that?
So in terms of our aspiration for high-speed rail, those goals continue to be important to us. There's no one fix for all of the improvements we need to make economically and climate-wise for our economy. It's why under President Biden's infrastructure law, we are investing in both repairing and upgrading our rail systems. And I know that there are visions from across the Midwest for how to do that. Won't happen overnight, but it's very important to provide those alternatives as well as electric vehicles and an increasingly clean and customer-friendly aviation sector. We're going to continue pushing at all three levels.
Kaylee Hall with the Detroit News.
Mr. Secretary, last week we have seen that the UAW is withholding its endorsement for President Biden until they see help in to have a just transition to electric vehicles. What can the administration do to help the UAW and its members in this transition?
One thing that's very important to this administration and certainly to the president is supporting our union workers. It's important to me. I grew up in South Bend, Indiana, home of Local 5 and Local 9. I know firsthand how the rise of the middle class was made possible through union workers and the good jobs they provided. We've talked about the building trade side of that with things like the IBEW partnership. Same is true in making sure that workers are benefiting from this EV revolution. Our message is that EV revolution is happening across the automotive sector, and it's going to happen with or without us. We have to make sure that there is success for the U.S. and our friends and for union workers in that transition, and it's something that we take very seriously.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out. Appreciate it.
Okay, we're going to do one group photo right by the side here.